She left me without warning, abandoning me and our little girl. I thought it was sudden heartbreak, until shadows of truth began to surface. Secrets, lies, and a powerful man's name kept appearing. The deeper I dug, the darker it got. And the truth changed everything. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, thank you. My name is Ryan. I'm 32 years old, and up until a certain Tuesday morning, I thought my life was normal. Not perfect, I mean, who has that? But it was mine, and I was proud of it. I had a wife I loved, a little daughter who made every day worth waking up for, and a home that, while small, always felt warm. Our mornings were usually the same, the soft sound of Emily babbling from her crib, the smell of toast drifting from the kitchen, the shuffle of Mia's slippers on the floor as she came in to kiss me on the cheek. It was a rhythm, a comfort. I thought we'd be moving through that rhythm forever. That morning, it was raining. Not the light, gentle kind of rain, but the steady, gray curtain that makes the world outside feel far away. Emily was in her high chair, her tiny hands clutching her cup, giggling at the sound of the rain hitting the window. I was standing at the stove, making eggs, humming a song I can't even remember now. And then Mia walked in. Something felt different. She didn't say good morning. She didn't smile. Her eyes weren't red from crying, but they weren't bright either. They were blank, like she was looking at me and through me at the same time. She just stood there for a moment, as if deciding how to start. When she finally spoke, the words came out slow and steady, almost rehearsed. She told me she didn't love me anymore. That was it. No explanation. No argument. No, we need to talk. Just a sentence so sharp it sliced through the morning air and left me standing there with a spatula in my hand, too stunned to even blink. At first, I thought it was a joke. A terrible one, but still. Mia had never been cruel. Maybe she was upset about something, maybe she just needed space. My mind scrambled for a reason, any reason, but she didn't give me one. She said she was leaving. Not for the day. Not for a week. For good. I remember my eyes darting to Emily, our 2-year-old little girl, who was staring between us, sensing something was wrong. I wanted to grab Mia's arm, to make her sit down and explain, to beg her to think about what she was doing. But before I could even form the words, she turned, walked down the hallway, and started packing. I stood frozen in the kitchen, listening to the sound of drawers opening, zippers closing, the dull thud of her suitcase hitting the floor. And then, the front door opened. She bent down, kissed Emily's forehead, and without looking at me, stepped outside. The door clicked shut. The rain kept falling. And just like that, my world fell silent. The first few hours after Mia left felt unreal, like my brain refused to process what had just happened. I kept telling myself she'd come back by evening. Maybe this was just some kind of twisted test, or a spur-of-the-moment breakdown she'd regret as soon as the rain stopped. But night fell, and the front door stayed shut. Emily was restless that evening. She cried when I put her to bed, kept calling for her mom in that small, innocent voice that cut right through my chest. I sat beside her crib, stroking her hair until her breathing slowed, but even then, her little hand stayed clenched around my finger, as if she was afraid I'd disappear too. When the house was finally quiet, I sat in the living room, staring at the couch where Mia usually curled up with a blanket. I tried calling her, straight to voicemail. I sent a message, then another, then another. No reply. Her social media? Silent. Her phone? Dead or turned off. Day 1 turned into day 2. Then a week. The reality began to sink in. She wasn't coming back. Those early days were survival mode. I still had to go to work, still had to make sure Emily was fed, bathed, and tucked into bed every night. But every time I passed a family in the park, every time I saw a couple holding hands in the grocery store, I felt this crushing pressure in my chest. Friends tried to help. Some came over with food, others offered to babysit. But no matter what they said, she doesn't deserve you, you'll be fine, you're strong, it all sounded hollow. Because the truth was, I wasn't fine. I was drowning in questions I couldn't answer. Why did she leave so suddenly? Was it something I did? Was she unhappy for a long time and I just didn't notice? Late at night, I'd sit at the kitchen table with my head in my hands, replaying our last months together. We hadn't been fighting. We had our little disagreements like any couple, but nothing major. There was no warning sign that she was about to blow our life apart. The part that hurt the most wasn't even losing her, it was watching Emily lose her. My daughter would toddle into the bedroom in the mornings, look at the empty side of the bed, and ask where Mommy was. I'd force a smile and say Mommy had to be away for a while. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, that Mommy had chosen to walk away from both of us. The house felt too big without Mia. Not in size but in sound. Every room seemed quieter, emptier, like her absence was soaking into the walls. I kept expecting to hear her laugh from the kitchen or her footsteps coming down the hall. But there was nothing. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock. And underneath all of that silence, a thought began to grow. A thought I didn't want to admit at first, but one that would eventually change everything. People don't leave for no reason. It started small, almost too small to notice at first. A coworker of Mia's, someone I barely knew, sent me a message out of the blue. Just a casual "hope you're doing okay," followed by a strange pause before they added, "I guess you've heard things." I didn't ask what they meant. I wasn't ready to hear it. But once you plant a seed like that, it grows on its own. A week later, an old neighbor mentioned seeing Mia in a different part of the city, not once, but several times. She was always dressed up, heels clicking on the pavement, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months before she left. The neighbor said she was with a man in a sharp suit, tall, confident, the kind of person who walks into a room and makes people turn their head. I told myself it was nothing. Just gossip. Maybe a friend from work. Maybe a client. My mind was desperate to file it away under something harmless. But then, the signs started piling up. Mia's social media, which had been almost dead during our marriage, suddenly came alive. New photos, fancy restaurants, wine glasses glinting in dim light, hotel lobbies with gold accents, designer handbags I knew we hadn't budgeted for. In every shot, she looked different. Not bad different. Just not like the Mia I knew. She had always been more of a jeans and sweater kind of woman, someone who laughed when I suggested buying a $300 dress. Now she was draped in silk, diamonds catching the light, her smile polished for the camera like she was living in a commercial. The more I saw, the more my chest tightened. Because if she could reinvent herself this quickly, maybe she'd already been living that other life before she walked out the door. At night, after Emily was asleep, I'd find myself scrolling through her posts, zooming in on the backgrounds, looking for clues. Who was taking these photos? Whose car was she stepping out of in that blurry reflection on the restaurant glass? It felt wrong, like spying. But there was this itch in my mind I couldn't scratch, the feeling that the truth was right there, just out of reach, and if I could grab it, everything would finally make sense. One night, while scrolling, I noticed a name that kept popping up in the comments. Daniel Pierce. I didn't know him, but his comments were always the same, subtle, short, but intimate. A heart emoji here. A champagne glass there. I clicked on his profile. What I saw made my stomach drop. Daniel Pierce. The name alone didn't mean much at first. But his profile. It was like stepping into another world. Expensive suits tailored to perfection. Crystal glasses of whiskey on private jet. Photos from charity galas where everyone smiled like they belonged in glossy magazines. And then I saw his job title, CEO of the company Mia worked for. It felt like a punch to the gut. I scrolled further, my eyes tracing every image. Most of them looked like typical corporate show-off posts, but then I started noticing something that made my pulse race. In more than a few pictures, in the background, not the focus, but there was Mia. Sometimes she was standing with a group of employees, other times she was caught mid-laugh next to Daniel himself. In one picture, he had his arm lightly resting behind her on the back of a chair. It wasn't obvious, but it was there. Too close, too familiar. I told myself it could all be innocent. Work events, team dinners. The kind of stuff that happens in any office. But my gut told me something else. And I've learned over the years, your gut doesn't whisper for no reason. I started remembering things. Little things I had brushed off before. The sudden late nights at work she claimed were because of last-minute reports. The overnight business trips that seemed to pop up without warning. The new perfume she wore that I'd never smelled before, not the kind you wear for the grocery store run. And then there was the shift in her behavior in those final months before she left. She was distant but not cold. Distracted, like her mind was somewhere else entirely. Some nights she'd be scrolling on her phone with a faint smile, but the moment I walked into the room, she'd lock the screen. Back then, I convinced myself it was stress. That she was tired. That maybe she was just burnt out from work and parenting. Now, the pieces started clicking together in a way that made my stomach turn. It wasn't just that she'd left me. It was who she might have left me for. And if my suspicion was right, then the woman I thought I knew had been living a double life, one with me and Emily. And another in the shadow of her CEO. That thought kept me awake for nights, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much of our life together had been real. Once the thought took root, I couldn't shake it. It was like my brain had been handed a puzzle box, and now, everywhere I looked, I was finding the missing pieces, pieces that had been in front of me the whole time, but I hadn't seen them for what they were. I remembered how Mia's job had changed right after Daniel took over as CEO. She'd been excited at first, talking about new opportunities and better connections. But it wasn't long before she started working late, a lot. The kind of late, where she wouldn't get home until midnight, tiptoeing through the house as if trying not to wake me. Then came the business trip. At first, they were rare, maybe once every few months. But in that last year, they became so frequent it was almost suspicious. They were always last minute, and she never liked me dropping her off at the airport. She'd say it was easier to take a cab. I thought I was being a supportive husband by not asking too many questions. Now I realized I'd been giving her freedom to disappear without accountability. I even started noticing scents. Not perfume this time, cologne. A deep, expensive kind I didn't wear. I'd smell it faintly on her clothes, even her hair, when she came home from those late nights. She'd brush it off, saying it was from a colleague's hug goodbye or from being in a crowded room. I believed her. Because I wanted to. Then there were the little changes in her habits. She started wearing more expensive clothes to work, even on days she said she'd be in the office all day. Her phone became her shadow, always in her hand, screen facing down whenever I was near. She was more careful with her words, avoiding stories about her day that involved certain people. And every time Daniel's name slipped into conversation, her tone shifted, just slightly, but enough for me to notice now. The more I thought about it, the more I felt this sick heaviness in my chest. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't paranoid. There was a pattern here, and it all pointed in the same direction. But suspicion alone wasn't enough. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. And that proof would come from a place I least expected. It happened on a quiet Thursday night. Emily was asleep, the house dim except for the soft glow of my desk lamp. I was sifting through a messy pile of unopened mail and half-folded bills. My focus was on numbers, due dates, and the slow grind of single-parent responsibility. Then I saw it, an email notification on my laptop. Not from Mia directly, but from a hotel downtown. At first, I thought it was spam. But then I noticed the details. Her name, her personal email, and a reservation receipt. The booking was for 2 nights in the city's most expensive 5-star hotel, the kind of place where the lobby smells like roses and every guest gets champagne on arrival. The kind of place we could never afford, not even for a single night. What made my stomach tighten wasn't just her name on the reservation. It was the billing information. The payment hadn't come from her account. The cardholder name was Daniel Pierce. I froze. My eyes kept scanning the screen, hoping I'd misread something. The dates on the booking matched one of her so-called business trips from months earlier, one where she'd come back home with a glow in her cheeks and a designer purse she brushed off as a gift from the company. I leaned back in my chair, my mind going completely still for a moment, like a sudden calm before a storm. This was it. This was the proof. Not whispers, not speculation, not piecing together patterns. A receipt. Her name. His payment. Their weekend. Memories started flooding in, now dripping with meaning I hadn't seen before. That night she didn't answer my calls until after midnight, claiming her phone had died. The perfume that didn't smell like hers when she hugged me upon returning. The way she avoided eye contact the morning after she got back. I felt a heat rise in my chest, not just anger, but something colder, heavier. It was betrayal made real, no longer hiding in shadows. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at that email like it was a confession written in neon. Somewhere deep inside, a switch flipped. I realized the woman I loved had been gone long before she packed her suitcase. What I had been holding on to these past months wasn't her, it was the ghost of the life we used to have. And now, that ghost was gone too. I didn't sleep that night. After reading that email over and over, I just sat in the dark, the laptop screen long since gone black, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I could hear the rain outside, light, steady, almost soothing if it weren't for the war going on in my chest. I walked into Emily's room and stood by her crib, watching her tiny chest rise and fall. She had her little hand curled under her cheek, her hair sticking to her forehead from the warmth of sleep. She looked peaceful, untouched by the chaos that had just torn through my world. But that was the thing. She didn't know. She didn't understand that her mother had chosen a man in a tailored suit over bedtime kisses and morning pancake. She didn't know that the woman who should have been tucking her in every night was instead sipping champagne in some hotel suite. It wasn't just that Mia had betrayed me. She'd betrayed her too. And the more I thought about it, the more that fact burned. Because I could take the pain. I could carry the heartbreak, the humiliation, the anger. But Emily? She deserved better than to grow up with one parent who was willing to walk away without a second thought. I kept asking myself, was it worth it for her? Was the taste of that luxury, those fleeting nights with him, worth tearing apart a family? I imagined her sitting across from Daniel at some dimly lit restaurant, laughing in that easy way she used to with me, wearing the necklace I couldn't afford to buy. And I wondered if, in those moments, she ever thought about the little girl who was falling asleep without her. The weight of it pressed down on me until my legs felt heavy. I sat on the floor beside Emily's crib, my back against the wall, and stayed there until the first light of morning crept through the curtains. That night changed something inside me. The sadness started to shift into something harder, sharper. I realized I'd been clinging to the hope that maybe she'd come back, maybe this was some kind of phase. But now I knew there was no coming back from this. The bridge between us wasn't just burned, it was turned to ash and scattered in the wind. For weeks after discovering the truth, I kept it to myself. Not because I wanted to protect her, but because I didn't know what to do with it. It felt like carrying a live wire in my chest. Any wrong move, and it would burn everything in its path. I went through the motions of daily life like a man on autopilot. I'd wake up, make Emily breakfast, drop her off at daycare, go to work, pick her up, feed her dinner, and tuck her into bed. On the outside, I probably looked calm, maybe even strong. On the inside, I was boiling. Every time I opened my laptop and saw Daniel Pierce's smug, confident face on the company's website, the pressure in my chest grew. Every time I drove past one of those hotels she stayed in, it felt like my hands tightened around the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. But it wasn't just him. It was her. I kept replaying that morning she left. Her cold expression. The way she avoided my eyes when she told me she didn't love me anymore. At the time, I thought it was confusion, maybe depression. Now, I knew it was calculation. She had already chosen him, she just didn't have the courage to say it out loud. One evening, after putting Emily to bed, I sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. My thumb hovered over her contact. My pulse was in my ears. I wasn't going to ask why anymore. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to tell her exactly what I knew. When she picked up, her voice was flat, like she was answering a call from a distant relative she barely remembered. She asked what I wanted. I told her. I laid it all out, the hotel receipt, the payment from Daniel, the photos, the late nights, the business trips that weren't business. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, steady but shallow. And then, she said it. Not an apology. Not a denial. Just 3 words that made my stomach turn. It wasn't meant to be. No guilt. No shame. Just dismissal, like our 6 years together and the child we brought into the world were some casual arrangement that had simply expired. I hung up. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I realized something in that moment. There was nothing left to fight for. She wasn't the woman I married. She wasn't the mother Emily needed. She was someone else now. And that someone else didn't belong in our lives. That night, I made a silent promise to myself. I would stop looking back. I would stop asking questions that didn't deserve answers. I would protect my daughter from this mess, no matter what it took. The morning after that call, I woke up feeling empty but lighter. It wasn't happiness, and it wasn't peace, not yet. But it was a strange kind of freedom. I no longer had to wonder if she'd come back. I no longer had to keep one foot in the past, waiting for a door that would never open. From that day on, every choice I made was about Emily and me. I took extra shifts at work, not just for the money, but to keep my mind busy. My evenings were for her, learning to braid her hair, making her laugh until her little cheeks flushed pink, reading her the same bedtime story 3 times because she loved the way I did the voices. The house started to feel different. It was still too quiet sometimes, but it no longer felt haunted by what had happened. It started to feel like our home, mine and Emily's, not the place Mia left behind. I sold the things that reminded me too much of her. The dress she left hanging in the closet. The wine glasses we bought for special occasions, but barely used. The framed photo of our wedding day that had been sitting face down since the night she walked out. Every small act of letting go was like taking another brick off my chest. And with each passing week, I realized something important. I wasn't just surviving. I was learning how to live again, differently this time. More carefully, but also more honestly. Emily became my anchor. Whenever I felt the bitterness creeping back, I'd look at her and remember why I was doing this. She didn't need to grow up hearing me curse her mother's name. She didn't need to feel like she was caught between 2 worlds. She needed one safe, steady place to belong. I wasn't perfect. There were still nights when the loneliness was loud, when I lay awake wondering if I'd ever trust someone again. But every morning I woke up, I had a reason to keep moving forward. I stopped checking Mia's social media. Stopped asking mutual friends about her. Stopped letting her live rent-free in my head. She had her life now. I had mine. And the more I focused on building ours, the less hers mattered. It's been a year since that rainy Tuesday when Mia walked out. A year since the kitchen went quiet, since the front door closed for the last time behind her, since I stood frozen in shock with Emily watching from her high chair. If you had told me back then that I'd make it here, not just breathing, but living, I would have laughed in your face. Back then, the pain felt permanent, like it had burrowed into my bones. I thought betrayal would be my shadow forever. But time has a way of reshaping things. I won't lie, there are still moments when it stings. When I see a couple laughing together in the park, Or when Emily draws a family picture and includes a figure with long hair, I feel that old ache. But it no longer controls me. It's just a scar. And scars aren't weaknesses. They're proof you survived. I've learned that sometimes losing someone isn't the worst thing that can happen to you. Sometimes it's the very thing that sets you free, free from lies, free from wondering, free from living in a half-life where love is only an echo. I've also learned that your worth isn't tied to who chooses to stay or who decides to leave. It's in the way you pick yourself up after the storm. It's in the laughter you share with your child over a messy pancake breakfast. It's in the quiet moments you realize you're okay, even if you're alone. And maybe the biggest lesson of all? You can't control what someone else does with their love, but you can control what you do with yours. I choose to give mine to the people who deserve it. To the little girl who still runs into my arms every evening like I'm her whole world. Mia may have walked away, but I stayed. I stayed for Emily. I stayed for myself. And that's the thing about betrayal, it might knock you down, but it doesn't get to decide if you get back up. Because I did. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, thank you.